So you've had chickens for a while now. You've fallen in love. You find yourself talking to chickens more than you do people. You have chicken t-shirts and kitchen decor. Chicken math is beginning to take hold, and you want more. What's going on, everybody? It is Cam here, Easy Work Acres, and today we're going to talk about increasing the size of your chicken flock. So a lot of people tend to start out with chickens, usually 20 or less birds, a lot of times 10 or less birds, maybe just a backyard setup or something like that. And you're considering increasing the size of your flock, maybe 50 plus birds, 40 plus birds, something like that. But when you start to get into those larger numbers comes larger problems along with that. And we want to kind of talk about that and what to expect in order for you to be able to prepare yourself ahead of time, unlike we did, and save yourself a whole lot of trouble in the long run. So that's what we're going to be getting into today. So let's get started. All right, so number one, do you have the space for a larger flock? If you currently don't, maybe you have a certain size run that your chickens are within or something like that, you may have to look into expanding the size of the run before increasing the size of your flock. Or if you are in a farm setup like us to where you're doing a mobile coop or something like that, making sure that you're having the proper setup for it. But one way or the other, chickens can mow down an area very, very quickly. So they'll eat up the grass in an area and create dust baths and all kinds of other stuff. And then once it rains, it turns to mud, and then it just gets really, really bad. So making sure that you have the space prepared for an increased size flock for what you currently have is really, really important. So keep that in mind when increasing your numbers. All right, number two is going to be, is your space protective enough for your birds? So can you keep them protected? Now, with an increased size in your flock, that also means increased noise and visibility to predators. So you're going to have an increased number of predators possibly trying to get at your flock, as well as increased numbers means increased chances of parasites and diseases being able to spread through your flock and at a very rapid rate when you get into the really large numbers. So keeping those things in mind when you were talking about increasing the size of your flock. Now, if your current build out is able to house the amount of hens or chickens in general that you're going to be keeping, then that's awesome. That'll help it protect as far as the predators, but taking care of the parasite and sickness side of things, making sure that you're treating the coop with DE and other things like that in order to keep parasites down, making sure that you're cleaning the coop out regularly, basic stuff as far as like solid standalone coops. Now, if you're on the movable coop side of things, similar to what we have in our setup, is do you already have the fencing necessary, like a poultry netting like what we have if you're doing a movable coop, and do you already have the fence charger? Those are expenses to take into account. Those help keep predators away, but they do cost money. Now, they do last forever once you have them. Like a good fence charger will last you years and years and years, and a good poultry netting fence will last you years and years and years. So it is a decent upfront investment, but it will last you a long time. But that does make a movable coop setup much, much easier. It'll be able to help you keep your birds protected from predators. But with the movable coop also, those other things like in a standalone coop as far as parasites and disease go, those still stand. So if you have a coop, one of the things in our coop specifically is that it has a mesh bottom. So all the poop falls through to the ground. So that helps keep the coop, for the most part, pretty daggone clean so that we don't have to worry about disease spreading that way. But we still have to go in regularly. About weekly, we go through and sprinkle DE throughout the coop and stuff like that. And even in areas we see the chickens dust bathing in to keep things like leg mites and other parasites at bay, because it can still happen even in a movable coop where they're out in the field and they're being moved frequently. Things like parasites, like leg mites, they happen. They're going to happen. There's not really any way around it, but you can keep it at bay and keep it from taking over a whole flock just by staying on top of stuff like that so that you don't have an issue like that outbreak across a large number, because large numbers are really hard to treat once it takes hold of a large flock. Number three comes down to food and water. Can you keep this larger flock fed and watered the way they need to be? Do you need more feeders? Do you need more waterers? And if you do, make sure that you get them ahead of time so that you have them ready and good to go, or maybe larger feeder or waterers. One thing that we have experienced that really sucks for both us and the birds is that you are not able to keep up with the amount of feed and water they're going through. So you're heading out there multiple times a day, trying to remember to make sure to go refill the feeders or refill the waters because you don't have what you need there when you have this larger flock suddenly, especially if you're buying like already adult birds from somebody and you're just like hit with the shock of a larger number out of nowhere. One thing that worked really well for us is when we totally switched over to a larger gravity feeder, because now at this point we have like over 100 birds. So having that many, it like not having a large container would have just been ridiculous to have to go out there and like fill multiple bucket feeders every single day. So a larger gravity feeder worked for us, as well as a larger gravity fed watering system worked better for us, with a attached off of a rain barrel and a gutter system and stuff, to where that keeps everything full all the time. And then we only have to go out there to refill the feeder maybe once or twice a week at most, and then just check the water frequently to make sure if we have a dry month or something to where it doesn't rain as much, that we're on top of their water. But at least we're not going out there constantly daily or multiple times a day, because that can eat up a lot of time. So do you have time for it is another part of that food and watering thing. Is your feed and water setup good for the amount of time that you have on hand to actually take care of it? Now, aside from the feed and water setup, do you have what you need to afford the chicken feed that you're going to be providing? So price out different types of feed, what you're willing to feed your chickens, as well as the cost. You know, each laying hen usually roughly eats about 1.5 pounds of feed per day, so you can kind of calculate that based off of how many hens you have and how many pounds of feed you will need each week, and be able to factor in if you're going to be able to swing it and be able to afford the feed, or, you know, offset the cost of it with the eggs that are sold if you're selling eggs on the side as well. Speaking of eggs, if this is laying hens we're talking about, make sure that you have enough nesting boxes, or at least the right type for the chickens that you're going to have. So the reason I say the right type is so that we had initially, I want to say maybe 16 to 20 nesting boxes in our coop, which was more than enough than what we needed, but it was a lot for us to keep up with all the time, making sure we're putting straw in there, and it was just a disaster. It was a mess, and we got sick of it, so we went with the rollaway nesting box route, which has been a godsend. It's been so great having rollaway nesting boxes, but one way or the other is, depending on what type of nesting box you have, can also determine how many nesting boxes you're going to need. So if you're going to have like just a regular old nesting box, you might have to increase the number that you have depending on how many birds you have. Now, mind you, chickens do typically, a bunch of them, they have their favorite nesting boxes, and increasing number of nesting boxes might not be necessary at all, but it also depends on how much you're going to be growing your flock size. Now, with us, we did rollaway nesting boxes. We converted all 20 of those into a regular one run of rollaway boxes, so the eggs roll out and they're out of there, and chickens don't stay in the nesting boxes long, so we didn't necessarily need to increase the number of nesting boxes. We just needed to change the type of nesting boxes we had, and that ended up working out really well for us. So keep that in mind when you're increasing numbers, that nesting boxes matter too, especially if you're increasing the number of chickens you have dramatically. Last point, again on eggs, is what are you going to do with all those eggs? Figure that out. If you are doing this for the sake of increasing the amount of eggs you're able to sell, which is part of that's 100% the reason that we increased in numbers, is because we had a lot of people buying eggs and we weren't able to keep up with the amount of people that wanted to buy eggs. So part of this was we wanted to do this for growing a farm, making somewhat of a business out of it. So that's why we did it. And we have people to sell to, and we still have a whole lot more room to grow because there is still a huge demand for our eggs. If that's the case for you, keep going, get those eggs, get them sold. If you don't have that and you do want to sell eggs, then keep working on ways of selling eggs. I have a whole video talking about ways to improve your sales with your eggs, so definitely check that out. I'll put that at the end of this video. But aside from that, the sale of eggs, if you're not going to sell them, maybe you just give them away or something like that, but definitely have a plan for them so that you don't end up with just a crap ton of eggs that just end up going to waste. Your family can't eat enough of them. You can't give any of them away or sell them. So just having a plan for them. Maybe you can use them even to feed your other animals or something like that. There's no wrong answer to do with the eggs. I just think that a lot of people don't think about what they're going to do with them when they have that increased number all of a sudden. So just keeping that one in mind. Alrighty, so that's all I got for you. Hopefully these were some helpful things to keep in mind for if you're expanding the size of your chicken flock, so that you can save yourself from a lot of the problems that we dealt with ourselves here on our farm. So if you like this video, please like and subscribe to the channel. We'd love to keep sharing things that are hopefully helpful to you. Please share anything in the comments that you felt like was either missed or that you just had more questions about. We'd love to hear your feedback, as well as be able to answer any questions that you might have. So thank you guys for watching. We appreciate your time, and I'll see you in the next video.